Well, after Warner Brothers tried to set up their DC universe with the Snyder Verse and other spin-offs and tie-ins such as Black Adam, which, yeah, I still kind of enjoyed, Shazam, Flash, and that interesting Wonder Woman movie, the DC universe that was created in 2013 has been scrapped and rebooted, and now we've got a new captain at the wheel with James Gunn, and his first movie in his new DC universe has just released in Superman. And thanks to Warner Brothers, I got to check it out. And damn, I think this is the film that is sort of what you needed to start or kick off a universe. Now, I know that there has been a bit of controversy, or maybe more so fan upset from Snyder fans and the Henry Cavill Superman fans, as Cavill was back as Superman at the end of Black Adam, teasing more to come into that universe, and I myself was pretty keen to see Cavill's Superman face off against the anti-hero of Black Adam, and whatever the hell they were trying to plan with the Flash movie. But about 2 months after that of Cavill coming back as Superman, we sort of got the universe rebooted and everything was gone. And we had a roller coaster of emotions in the DC fandom of excitement, annoyance, and whatever the hell Aquaman 2 was. Now, DC fans have had it pretty rough for a while, and while most fans enjoyed the recent Batman film, which seems to have its own ongoing sequel delays, DC fans have been left wanting more. So when James Gunn was announced to be the new head of the DC universe, I was excited because, well, I enjoyed Guardians 1 and Guardians 2. James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie was funny, gory, and thoroughly enjoyable, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 left me an emotional mess during some scenes, but it also worked as a great final chapter for me on the MCU, because I've not really been enjoying anything the MCU has done after Endgame, besides maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Spider-Man.
Black Bolt could destroy you with one whisper from his mouth.
What mouth?
Now shut up! Shut up!
But while I was excited, I wasn't overly confident that Warner Brothers would let this universe grow and evolve, and I thought they'd just scrap it, just similar to what they did with Zack Snyder's universe. However, after seeing this latest interpretation of Superman, I can firmly say that I myself am more excited for this DC universe, and there's a few reasons for it. Now, as the film is in a rebooted universe, it is not Henry Cavill as Superman, as James Gunn's Superman movie, as well, isn't an origin story of how Kal-El landed in Smallville, his first fist fight, or how he got his costume. None of these questions are overly answered in this movie, and that's great, because the trinity of Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man don't really need to have their origin stories retold again. However, this movie takes place a couple of months after Superman has revealed himself to the world, and while Superman is a new hero on the planet, this universe, or this DC universe, has known of metahumans for some time. But the story has its standard elements of Superman being challenged, and in this film tormented, by Lex Luthor. We've got Lois Lane and Clark Kent with a love interest dynamic here, where in this movie as well, Lois knows that Clark is Superman and they're already dating. But the overall story is Lex trying to defeat Superman, Superman trying to live in a world where he's simply just trying to do good, but dealing with international politics, the media, as well as social media in a way too, and how James Gunn handles this is actually pretty funny. But the best way to describe the story of this film is think of an episode of the brilliant Superman the Animated Series from the 90s. The colour palette and theme in this universe for Metropolis is pretty damn close to what we get in the animated series, because the sky is bright and blue, Superman is a Boy Scout, and well, as cliche as it is, Superman is constantly saving people because that's Superman. But without going into spoilers, Superman finds himself facing off against more than a few challenges, including some of Lex Luthor's own metahumans, giant kaiju fights, soldiers in mech suits, and James Gunn honestly had me impressed with how Lex Luthor goes about dealing with Superman and actually trying to defeat him, because we're not just getting the standard stab him with kryptonite or do something with kryptonite again as a plot device here. And this Superman is also all about doing good, about saving lives, and in one scene, he leaves an alien threat for the Justice Gang to handle, and while he goes on to focus to save someone simply because they're scared and alone, and to me, that is Superman. Now, as I said, the movie is a bit like a extended episode of Superman the Animated Series, but it is also pretty damn impressive because the acting across the board is solid. David Cornsweat's Superman is being the traditional, iconic Boy Scout. He is saving civilians, he's got that funny, charming style to him, but his Clark Kent is also awkward, goofy, and charming in his own way. Rachel Brosnan's Lois Lane is also pulled straight out of the comics and also the animated series too, and she does have some great moments, especially early on when she's interviewing Superman, and there's some pretty good on-screen moments between Clark and Lois. Now, Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor is flat evil in this film, where unlike previous interpretations of Luthor where you might have been able to see his perspective or potentially side with him, Luthor here in this film had me honestly go, Superman, for the love of God, go fuck him up, multiple times in this film. Now, while the trio of Superman, Lois, and Lex are really damn impressive, there are also three standout characters in the film for me. Firstly, with Jimmy Olsen, played by Scarlett Cassandra, who surprisingly is pretty damn funny. Now, he had some great moments that are just the standard Jimmy Olsen sort of character elements from the comics and the animated series, but he also shares some great scenes with Sarah Sampaio's Eve that had me in stitches. Now, Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific, well, pardon the shit joke here, but he's legit terrific in this film. Out of all the characters in the movie, Mr. Terrific is a hero that I know very little about. However, after the movie, I kinda wanted to learn more about the character, and there are moments in the story where Mr. Terrific had the cinema laughing with his dry personality, his technology, and even his interactions with Krypto. But it will come as no surprise that Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner was one of my favourite characters in this film. Now, personally, Green Lantern is my absolute favourite comic book character, well, the Hal Jordan interpretation of him, and when it was announced that Nathan Fillion, who he himself is a massive Green Lantern fan and has voiced Hal Jordan in animated movies multiple times, is playing Guy Gardner, I was a little confused as to why he's not playing Hal Jordan, but Fillion's cockiness as Gardner is honestly S-tier casting right here, because Guy's interaction with Hawkgirl, who is also pretty damn solid in the film, as well as Superman, Lois Lane, basically any time Guy is on screen, he is cocky, he is full of himself, and he's damn hilarious. Even his Green Lantern constructs were funny. But we've got to talk about Krypto, the superpowered dog, and I gotta say, it's probably kind of standard as well, but if you're a fan of dogs, you'll love him, because he's naughty, he's playful, and honestly, Krypto stole a lot of the scenes, and I took a mate with me who also has a dog very similar to Krypto, and multiple times I sat there going, dude, that's your dog. But what I also really enjoyed about the film, besides the acting, the world, the story, and how James Gunn thought of a creative way for Lex to fight Superman, was how this universe's Superman handles some near identical situations that Henry Cavill's Superman did with political and media attention. Now, Superman doing international acts of stopping crime and saving lives, the way that James Gunn answers these questions honestly sort of felt like how a Boy Scout Superman would respond. Okay, the acting across the board is pretty damn solid, with no one seemingly to be sort of out of place. The story and the world is basically pulled out of the animated series, and I really enjoyed the film, but the only sort of issue I had with the film is its lack of own musical identity. Now, the film uses the iconic John Williams score, and while it is altered and recorded by John Murphy and David Fleming, and it weaves its way into the story naturally, it is damn iconic and powerful, and it works here for Superman, but it does get overused a fair bit, a little similar to, say, Michael Giacchino's Batman theme that would play in the Matt Reeves Batman film, which again is a really good track, but if you watch that film, it is used a lot. However, speaking of Batman, a character that has had a heap of interpretations, from Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Robert Pattinson, or the greatest of all time, Kevin Conroy, each of these Batmans have had a theme that goes along with them, and you can hear the relevant theme and pick up which Batman that goes with sort of its relevant score. Now sure, George Clooney and Val Kilmer share a theme, but it's a pretty damn good theme. However, the only theme we've got for Superman is the brilliant John Williams Christopher Reeves theme, the Henry Cavill Hans Zimmer theme, which is also really damn good, and the animated series, which is also pretty damn cool, just not as iconic as the Batman the animated series theme, but I feel like David Cornsweat's Superman should have had his own inspiring theme. Now that's not to say that John Murphy and David Fleming using chord tones and elements of John Williams' score doesn't suit this Superman, that's not what I'm saying, it just sort of doesn't have its own identity. However, while the Superman John Williams theme drop is pretty frequent in the film when Superman is doing something like saving lives or lifting heavy objects, it does work well for the return of the big Boy Scout Superman. But sort of what hit me completely different for this movie that no other comic book movie has done for me personally, is how James Gunn handles parenting, which is a somewhat core part of Superman's story, being the last son of Krypton of Jor-El and Lara, and being raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent. And as a recent father myself, it sort of hit me right in the feels, like Yoda feeling all of the Jedi during Order 66. Now, I won't go into any spoilers here, but there are moments that are also perfectly timed with some of James Gunn's iconic soundtrack needle drops, and yeah, the end of the film had me smiling, teary, and clapping. And on that too, this version of Superman wasn't only great for me as a DC fan loving the return of the big blue Boy Scout Superman, but this will be a Superman that a heap of kids, including my own, will grow up with. Now, some kids might have grown up with the giant ball of muscle that was Henry Cavill, which he was a damn good Superman, don't get me wrong about that, but this kind of feels like the return of the iconic sort of traditional Superman, where Metropolis is constantly sunny and attacked by random aliens and kaiju fights. Now, to say that I'm excited for this DC universe is a little bit of an understatement, because when you go back and take a look at the first MCU movie with Iron Man, the audience and the fans were excited for what might be next, especially with that original end credit scene with Nick Fury, and the MCU grew into a powerhouse, and then kind of crumbled under its own weight a bit. But I remember walking out of Man of Steel being somewhat hopeful for what might be next, only for a few years later to walk out of the theatrical cut of Batman vs Superman, asking myself, what the fuck did I just watch? I remember my wife, which is my girlfriend at the time, turning to me saying, hey, what did you think of that? And I just went, I don't know. But when I walked out of this Superman film, I was excited to turn around and go straight back in and watch it again. Seeing a well-constructed, a well-edited, and crafted Superman, Metropolis, Lex Luthor, hell, even newer characters to the general audience like Krypto, Mr. Terrific, or Jimmy Olsen, really damn impressive. And personally, what solidified this is a good movie for me is that Warner Brothers invited me to the screening, and I took a friend with me who doesn't overly like Superman as a character and for movies. And he was basically sitting with me and wanting to go to the movie with me because he wanted to see my reaction geeking out to a Superman film. And he liked this film. My friend didn't like Man of Steel, he didn't like Batman vs Superman or Justice League, including the Snyder cuts, and the only DC movie he likes is the Nolan Batman films, and exclusively the Nolan Batman films. But I was really surprised when we walked out of the screening and he turned to me saying, this was actually a good movie. Now, as you can tell, I absolutely love this film, and sure, I can see this review coming off a bit biased, as I am a massive DC nerd, because I've got DC comic book tattoos, I've got toys and statues and vinyl records and all that sort of stuff, but I've seen more than a few tweets trying to review bomb the film, saying restore the Snyder Verse, and even some upset MCU fans trash James Gunn for swapping sides. But for me, I'll say this, you can enjoy Marvel and DC, you can enjoy and love what James Gunn is doing with Superman and his DC universe, and still go back and love the Henry Cavill Zack Snyder Dark Universe that they provided. Hell, without Henry Cavill Superman, you probably wouldn't have this film. But I can also see some people watching this film and it's not overly their jam, and that's completely fine. Hell, there are some DC movies, especially there's a recent one as well, that wasn't really for me, but I know a lot of people who really liked it, and I was like, dude, I'm glad you liked it. Personally, just wasn't my jam, and I'm not going to harsh someone's buzz for enjoying what they like. But if you're even remotely interested in checking out this movie in the first sort of new rebooted DC universe, or maybe you just want the return of Boy Scout Superman, I recommend checking it out yourself and getting your own opinion from there. But whether your favourite Superman is Christopher Reeves or you prefer the DC animated universe Superman, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.